but that.
All right, Marie, can you see us or do you still see the black screen?
No, I can see you guys.
Right.
Open the door, do you think that would be okay? We'll try that.
Mel, you have an extra one of these, Mel? You have an extra one?
I like clear off a lot. It's today.
Pens?
Yeah, no, to steal.
My favorite.
You should grab them at the front desk as hell. Hide them and then somebody puts them away.
I think they get stolen. Oh. No Grant.
Okay, Grant's here.
Oh, in person. I didn't even see you sneak in. I was paying way too much attention to the TV.
Screen time for you.
Yeah, I need to get cut off, that's for sure. Okay,
Ready to get started here. So this is our one of two workshops. This is Thursday night, the February the 19th, special city council meetings.
No, just workshop.
Approval, what's that?
Just workshop.
Workshop, I'm sorry, workshop.
Yes.
Special meeting workshop. Call the meeting order at 6:33. Make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Second.
Any other comments, changes? Does everybody have a copy of the agenda? You can Grant?
No.
Okay. Seeing no discussion, comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
So the first item is a wait a minute, I'm on the wrong.
You're on the wrong.
Next week.
Mike, what are you talking about?
It's Tuesday. Yeah, this is.
Yeah, this is the agenda. We just approved, hopefully. Very, very formal,
An informal workshop.
right? No, that's all right. So I'll just kind of
Go ahead.
kick us off. Go through. So as you see with the memo, page 2 starts off, kind of just lays out the rough walkthrough of the different parts of the zoning ordinances and just kind of talk about some things. This is going to be very open and free and share ideas and share concerns. And, you know, I'm kind of here to help guide, but also listen really to if there's any comments, questions, concerns from council, anybody else. As we go through this, that way staff can make any recommendations for corrections to be able to bring to council, hopefully at the March council meeting. Because we'd really like to get these approved, so that way we can start having companies review them and move forward with their projects. There's been a lot of hard work in the background from our steering committee group through planning and zoning group to get it this far. So we can dive into it. We'll do that. Any questions? All right, cool. And you guys can hear us online just fine?
Yes.
Okay. So.
Yes, I can hear you.
So really kind of the first part here, like I said, I just put in a different, took a lot of the different sections here and tried to juggle in between the 2 days to really hit on. First, just kind of talk about, you know, zoning does and doesn't, and I'm gonna put Evan on the spot here a little bit with this first section here, but you know, what does zoning do and not do? What do they kind of regulate? And then kind of help explain through his experience, the roles between council, their roles versus staff, that's just what you would see with the planning and zoning commission. So, want to start us off with that? You just-
Certainly. So Evan Munson, planner with Stantec. So I'm that voice that's usually on the computer, but today I get to see with all you guys here in person. I guess a quick overview, obviously planning and zoning is a way for you guys as a community to essentially guide or direct development how you wish. So where do you want residential properties? Where do you want commercial, industrial, so on and so forth? And then it drills down into the details of, what is the maximum height of a structure, for example? How many parking spaces are required for a commercial use versus industrial use? And then is there any additional requirements? Is there screening, landscaping? And then obviously, how do you divide land? So is there requirements on how big a lot is? Should there be areas set aside for parks? Is there maybe a fee that someone pays in lieu of setting aside land for parks? And all that hopefully sets it up so that once development does actually occur, all that can work in sync with obviously all the infrastructure you have. So your water, your sewer, your streets, et cetera. And then obviously that will generate tax income for you for here, the city. The different roles that the zoning code does is, again, it guides that development, but doesn't necessarily tell you how to build it. And that's your building code. So it's more, I guess, kind of citing, where is it located on the property, what type of use it is. So again, commercial, industrial, residential, kind of those big three, but maybe you'll have more specifics. So maybe you'll have single family residential allowed in a certain zone, duplexes maybe allowed in other zones. Commercial, that can range from anything such as retail, office space, and then industrial is maybe more manufacturing, generating goods or creating products. You guys as the council get to essentially kind of dictate all that policy. So whenever a request comes to you guys get to either approve or deny it. A lot of requests that come before you guys are going to be typically one of two options. They're going to either be a legislative request or what's called a quasi judicial request. And so anytime you're creating ordinances, so obviously this process right now is legislative, so you're actually setting the rules up, and then a quasi judicial would be when you actually have the rules in front of you and you get to decide, okay, does this request meet those rules or does it not? And then that's kind of when we get into the weeds of reviewing, are these things met? Are they not? Is there stuff that could be added as a condition of approval, for example? So that'd be a conditional use permit or a variance, for example. Planning and Zoning Commission, they are kind of your, I guess, boot soldiers on the ground. They're doing a lot of the footwork for you guys, reviewing it ahead of time. They'll kind of see it first at the city level and kind of provide any sort of feedback. A lot of times they'll do also the public hearings for you as well. So they'll get all the public engagement, kind of synthesize all that, come up with a recommendation, and you guys get to decide, okay, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? And then ultimately approve or deny a request. So the Planning Commission kind of does a little bit of what you guys do. They also get to typically dictate your comprehensive plan. So whenever you guys update that, typically by statute, the Planning Commission, hence the name planning, that's their main task. But you guys as the council can kind of dictate and kind of set the direction of what you want them to do. The staff role is kind of more the administrative side. So when someone wants to do something, ideally they'll reach out to the city, kind of figure out what's going on, what is allowed, what isn't allowed. And then when someone does formally apply, they'll submit that request to the city. So that might be Mel or Jason. They'll receive that firsthand. They'll forward it to a planner such as myself. We'll review, make sure, does this fit all the criteria, what we need for a submittal? Do they have a survey? Do they have a plan? Did they give you all the information on those surveys and plans that you need to know to actually review the request? Is there anything missing or not? And then once that request is deemed complete, we'll kind of do our end, review your codes that you have, kind of give you our assumptions or analysis of whether it meets your code or not, and then kind of help guide you guys through the process. Because as you get through later here in this document, you'll notice there's a 60-day rule, which means you basically have a shot clock of how long or quick you take reviewing requests. And so we're kind of trying to make sure you guys are moving forward in the process and not getting hung up in any spots. Once you guys do, let's say, approve a request, staff kind of helps make sure that they're getting anything else that they need to be doing. So such as building permits, electrical permits, if there's any sort of sewer infrastructure project, et cetera. So with that, is there any additional questions? Because that's a very elevator pitch of how planning works.
Okay. So diving into it, kind of get into, and you'll see in this memo that I put out, it started with the summaries kind of each section here. We'll go through, obviously, you come in through the first part of this is your purpose. It's listed out in the first part of the ordinances here. Basically goes through, sets the legal authority and policy foundation for zoning decisions. Essentially, they're trying to implement the city's comprehensive plan to promote orderly development within the city. Just again, that's what this section in here in the city code just kind of spells out that information. Like we talked about the comprehensive plan, that's something that is usually taken on by planning and zoning at the direction of council. As we get into this, I think we all know that's an older plan, probably should be updated here in the coming years. I think that's gonna be important. But as of right now, we go off of that, and so that is listed, something that's listed in here.
I have a question on the purpose. So as I was reading it, should the purpose maybe have a little more clarity of like fiscal sustainability and really infrastructure efficiencies? I think, this is where, in my mind, council has the authority to really balance the growth, the density, and then really that fiscal sustainability. Right now, it's just really emphasizing the welfare of orderly development, but not really thinking about how do we talk about not just growing our tax base, but having kind of the right ways to do that. I don't know if there's something in maybe that that we want to talk a little bit about, like having the right growth for our city. And I don't know if that's too far in the weeds, but right now I know we want to grow, but we should also be really cognizant of the growth and the density and what it means from a financial sustainability. And I think that's where we probably need to just level set.
So I think from my interpretation of what you're asking, Marie, I look at that and I don't know that that's something necessarily that's specific towards needing to be in the city code. I think that's something that would be built into a comprehensive plan as well as a goal setting, like council does a goal setting session. What are the goals for the city moving forward? This is more just the guiding principles to help steer that direction.
Yeah, I'm just looking at like so it says to promote and protect the health, safety, and general welfare of the inhabitants of the city of Orinoco. So again, I think that's where, as city council, right, we have the authority to balance the growth and the density and make really wise decisions on what that looks like. And I don't know if there needs, and maybe it's something as we talk about goals, but I'm just thinking it's not just about growth, it's about the right level of growth and the right locations as we start to build out the zoning versus right now it's just saying we're going to grow and here's kind of the plans to grow. I don't know if that helps, but just a thought on some of the purpose.
Yeah, so I would look at that and I would say, okay, yeah, it's tough because with that, I guess I would say, councils change and positions and things change. So, even the city influx, I mean, we could get up to growth and then, we would, can't really grow anymore. We don't want to, we want to maintain. So again, that's the ideal of councils to make sure we're maintaining. I don't know that would be something that would be put in the code. Evan, maybe you can help me.
I think in a roundabout way, a lot of the purpose statements, you have, A through P, so there's a lot of statements in there already. I think in a roundabout way, that kind of covers what you're looking at. In the sense that you want, fiscally responsible development, I think is kind of my takeaway from this. If you guys wish to just add another line, you could do that. I think to Jason's point, though, the comprehensive plan is kind of the, overarching guide to what you want to do. And that's probably ideally the best place to put it, but I don't think there's anything just like thrown in here as well, so.
I see the comprehensive plan as a vision for the city,
Correct.
how it's going to grow versus the codes, which is the working document.
Yes.
So the vision is the 20,000 foot level of where we want to go. And this is in the weeds with the detail of how you,
Correct.
if something does come to this committee, we have codes to follow, so.
Okay, well, maybe we just need to make sure it's there. I know that's a hot topic for a lot of the residents about the right level of growth and the right level of density and the right location. So maybe we need to make sure it's listed in there.
Do you think K, kind of speaks to that, Marie?
I think it kind of, I don't know, orderly, maybe the word orderly gets me. Because it doesn't get into like the right sustainment of growth. It is talking about just orderly development, and orderly can be a lot of things to a lot of different people. It could be a big bang. It could be anyone that wants to. It could be a plan. I'm okay if it goes into the comprehensive plan. I just know that, like I said, this has been a hot topic for many people. And if we don't address like how we balance the growth and the density and all of these things, and not just to increase tax base, but do it in a sensible way, I think we're missing the mark.
I agree with that.
And I think that going through these other sections, that's where we're going to have to decide what is fiscally responsible, what is appropriate
Mhm.
lot sizes and house sizes and all of that. So I think that we ultimately get into that by developing, the R1, R2, M1, B1 sections.
Yeah, the how, where that's why I was thinking if we call it out, right, that is our goal. Right, if you're talking about goals versus the how to do it, if the first section of the 151.002 is like the overarching goal, that's maybe where we need to say our goal as a city, right, is to balance growth and the density and be fiscally sustainable to our residents or to whatever we want to say, like that's a goal. And then getting down into the detail about, okay, R1 is going to have this type of lot size and we're going to require this, R2 is this, some of the B zones are going to be some of these things. Like that's the how to me, where when you look at the purpose and intent, it doesn't get into that goal, which I think is where I was trying to maybe call something out. But again, if it's in the comprehensive plan, I'm okay with that. I know that's in that next section there. It talks about bringing that to light. I just want to be able to give everyone the same state of mind that we want to grow, but we want to do it in a well thought out plan. And we're not just going to add density to increase that tax base. We're going to do it in a sensible way that makes sense for our city.
That's why I go back to that should be in the comprehensive plan section. Or be in the comprehensive plan itself, because that's gonna be your guiding factor for growth for the future years to come. So, and that'll kind of give you that sense of this is how we're gonna do it and give you the building blocks for future growth.
This is a silly question, but do we have a comprehensive plan?
We do from like, what, 2006?
I've never seen it.
2016 too, there was another one too that was in there, so there were two that were in there.
So maybe that's the next phase that we need to look at and make sure that that's up to date.
So
2016? Oh,
06 was the actual plan, and then
I've got it.
you guys came back and updated the future land use map within said plan. So the map is new, which is what Jim's referring to, but the text of the plan's a little out of date, which is what Jason had.
Yeah.
What was the date on the flow?
2016.
And I feel like we tried to add
Was 2020
in this budget to do a new plan,
comprehensive plan? No, I don't think that we did.
but I don't think it went through.
Yeah,
We talked about an EDA, the
Yeah.
action plan in the 2027 budget. Because we didn't plan for money, but talking with Kurt, our executive director, they've our EDA was looking at putting together an RFP at some time during 26 to plan for a budget. Is one aspect we're looking at. So
and that will be something we can discuss later. I mean,
yeah,
it needs to be done, we know it. So,
I think to add to the earlier point, your current comprehensive plan, which again is old, does kind of address some of those concerns that we want to be balancing growth with sustainable development. So maybe that kind of already addresses some of those
yeah.
concerns.
Okay, anything else on this section? We'll move on to the next part of this. The next section, rules and definitions. This just provides extensive definitions and interpretations for the rules, that'll help reduce, ambiguity and legal risk. Basically, this section provides, it's critical to, consistent enforcement and includes modern land use language. Again, this kind of just meant to go through if there's question, oh, what is this? What do they mean by this? Or what do they mean by that? That's where we refer to the definition section for this. This is a common section in any city code. You usually start off with the definition section, and that's one to be, you know, for people to reference for that section. This won't apply to other sections of our city code. It is specific for the 151s. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? I don't think I had anything in here that really stuck out to me. It's all pretty boilerplate.
The only thing I would have is I think that as we go through the codes, there may be something that may circle back to the definitions. You know, I'm sure sometimes we'll talk about the DF development flex. We'll talk about solar energies. We'll talk about, there's some diagrams missing on page 8. Escrow versus our cost security agreement. That may or may not be added. Those are all things I think the definitions for the most part are good. I just think that there are some discussion as we go in that will kind of reflect our definitions, but.
Can I ask a question? So on the definition in the family section, it's B and C, like how would we uphold that?
I have that one highlighted in mine too.
Which one is it?
It's
Please,
family B, it says a group of not more than 4 individuals, none of whom are related by blood or marriage, adoption or foster care, but all whom are maintaining a common residence. And then C is up to 2 adult individuals, whether related or unrelated, and the parents and children of each, if any, residing in the same dwelling unit and maintaining a common residency.
Oh,
How would
that
we-
seems very excessive and detailed. I don't know.
I don't know why we would be that. I mean, I get what it's trying to say is you don't want a house with 10 people living on it that aren't related. But again, I don't know how would you enforce that?
I look at that as a, yeah, kind of a coverall where, okay, we do end up with a residential unit that claims to be a family living there, but we know through reports or whatever and through code enforcement action that, hey, we've got 6 vehicles and there are clearly 10 different people there that have, you know, that appear to be living out of there, to be able to go and enforce and say, hey, this is what this is meant for. As far as, I mean, I would assume, but in this was all reviewed by their legal too. I'm assuming that it has enforcement behind it. I don't know, my comment was, can you limit it to a group of 4 individuals in section B? I don't know. But like I said, it's kind of just to cover yourself on it.
You could also get a conditional use or variance if there would be, if something like that would come up, but at least it would come to our attention.
Yeah.
What's going on, so.
But I just think of like myself, right? So I got 3 kids. They're not adults, but say they go to college and then they come back. So I wouldn't even fit. Well, I guess I would fit probably in the B, but if I was C, I'd have more than 2. You know, I don't know. It seems weird to me. I get what it's trying to do. I don't know. Again, I think we have to think about the times that we're in. There's families that have big families and some, again, right? Adult children come and live back with their parents. I know it's just a term, but I don't want someone to be like, oh, it's in there and I'm going to report it. And then we're going to be in the space that we either need to enforce it or get rid of it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I question if it's any of our business.
To have in there, go ahead.
Say again, Paul.
I question if that's any of our business and who's living in the house. If there's no criminal activity, what's the issue?
I would say it falls more under when there's a health and nuisance issue. That's why it's in there kind of to cover the city
Yeah.
as an enforcement policy. Not that we really care who's living there, but if it does become an issue where there's a health concern or a major nuisance concern, that the city is able to act upon it, to be able to take action to mitigate that for the community, for that neighborhood, and to help with
Okay.
that problem.
Well, then explain to me what we need, then we need, guess we need a definition of what's a health problem.
That would be in our other code section under public nuisances.
It's awfully vague is what it is. So I just question if it should even be there.
I think it's good to have in there, yeah. Again, you can get a variance or, that they go along with it if somebody complained about it.
This doesn't preclude, and if my parents moved in with me and my wife's parents moved in with me and then my kids moved home, they're all blood related or they're all marriage related, so that doesn't even qualify B right there. It doesn't matter how many there are living in the house, it doesn't qualify B at all. Cause they're all blood related or marriage related, so.
I think it's okay.
So I think that this is keeping, more than like. I don't know. This is probably turning homes into rentals for their kids. Or who are gonna rent out 5 other rooms and they're gonna be lit, like, that's where this kind of takes into play here.
Yeah, like somebody built.
Is there other language that applies to like the rental situation versus it being like a single family residential? I mean, does that define the difference between the two?
And so since this is the definition section, if we got into a rental section, we might not be using the word family.
That's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
like, is it defined whether you're using the intent of the property is for single family residential or is it a
Right.
rental?
Right.
Cause I totally get what you're saying about, I'm currently in that situation. I have kids in my 20s. They wanna buy something or rent something, they're gonna need 4 or 5 roommates, right? They kind of need to pool their money. So is that inclusive of this or not?
Well, and it just depends on how the code is written in the rental section. If it says family in the rental section, then I would assume this would apply, but if it doesn't say family, then I would assume this does not apply if it's not using the definition.
Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but Daniel, in your example, if something, like if all of those people lived in your home, then you'd have to get a conditional use if we started to see some issues.
No, it says none of whom are related by blood or marriage.
Yeah, but look at C. Up to 2 adult individuals, whether related or unrelated, and the parents of children of each, if any residing in the same dwelling unit and maintaining a common residence.
Yeah, so what that's saying is you have 2 individuals, whether they're
Yep.
related or not.
Yep,
And so then either their parents or their children residing in the same dwelling and maintain that residence, that is considered a family. So it doesn't
Yeah.
matter, if you could have 10 kids, you could have your parents live there, 10 kids. You're all there, as long as they're basically, direct relatives, they're gonna be considered part of the family and be allowed.
okay. I read it differently, but okay.
That's my interpretation of it. Cause you're reading, and the parents and children of each referring back to the 2 adults. If there are any for those 2 adults residing in that same dwelling, then they're allowed.
But if both sides of Daniel's mom and dad came and lived with him, there'd be 4 adults. And then Daniel and his wife are parents and then their kids.
Yeah, but you don't have to meet all 4 of these conditions. You have to meet one of the conditions. And in my scenario, you're meeting B.
B, okay. I don't, it just reads weird to me. I don't know.
I get where you're coming from, but I think it's a misreading on it. I think
Okay.
that yeah, I understand what you're saying though, but yeah, it's meant to be like, so, if Daniel's parents came and lived with him and then his wife's parents came and lived with him, they'd all still be considered family living under his roof. Because they are the two primary, you take the two adult individuals, they're the primary for that house. Anybody related to them that's either a child or a parent would be considered family and be allowed to live there.
I'm assuming the definition for family is in here because family is mentioned 78 times in the code. So,
This is the definition for family though.
Yeah.
It doesn't, yeah, but family's kind of a whatever makeup it is. It's-
Yeah, this is pretty standard language for 90% of communities in the state. So,
That's why it's in there.
yeah, it's basically kind of like what you guys were talking about earlier. You don't want to have someone renting out every room in their house and then it's not really a single family house. That's kind of the intent behind it, having something like this.
Is there any way we could have someone look at it and maybe try to make it more clear? Cause maybe I'm the only one that's getting stuck on that, but the B to me. B to me is a shared household, right? Up to 4 individuals who are not related but live together in one household. C is a household consisting of up to 2 adults, and it doesn't matter if they're related or unrelated, and their children are all living together in one house. Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yeah, Mike's already gone through this stuff, Murray, and so I don't think he had any issues with it.
No, I don't
But I
know.
do.
I don't know of another way. I look at
It's,
legal definitions can be
yeah,
confusing at times. I mean, when you're looking at, I don't know, I've seen the ways state laws are written sometimes and you look at the wording and
To me, this is fairly ambiguous, like it's, yeah.
The problem with ambiguous nature is if we're trying to enforce things, then we have to enforce it fairly for all. So I'm just gonna call that out.
yep.
We can move on. I think that's confusing for all, and we're a community with lots of a family with lots of kids and maybe bringing their parents back and kids coming home from college. I just think we could be prime for having some difficult conversations and trying to explain what a family means and who should be in one household and not. So, but we can move on.
And Maria, we'll take a look at it as staff and see if there's anything we can put our heads together and come up with, so.
So one question on the definitions, I know I'm not counsel, but we talked about this pretty at length in P and Z the one night. But the one that's not in here, I see setback, but I do not see anything about step downs. That was something we had talked about. I know that comes up in R1. It's not listed in there either, but I don't know if that needs to be a definition or if we need to talk about it later. It's fine. I just want to make that call out that step down is not listed in the definition.
I don't think that there's anything in
R1 about step downs, though. I think we ended up going with the larger lot size. And then if a developer wanted to put in smaller lot sizes in R1, then they would go to the development flex. And that's where the city would say, you have to have a step down from this neighborhood down to the smaller lot sizes that you wanted. So that was I think that was the ultimate outcome of
The conversation we had.
that conversation.
Because initially it was a step downs to the adjacent or to the current larger lots.
Yeah.
If they're gonna step down before you get to the 14,000, so that's out now.
I
or
think.
or be in the flex like you're talking
Yeah,
about. That was there.
was Flex, and then we could actually determine what that step down is as the conditions of the flex. It makes it a little bit easier to, like, putting that language in R1, I think is what Lori was saying, is that it's easier to just go with pushing them to the development flex. So then we can just say exactly what we want to happen versus writing it all out in R1 as a separate contingency. So, I mean, since it's not mentioned in the code, then that's probably why there's not a definition,
Right,
but
I get that, and that's why, because I noticed reviewing earlier, it wasn't in there, and
Yeah.
that was one of my concerns, that we talked about it, but I didn't see it added in,
I
so.
don't have a problem with finding a definition for step down and putting it in there though, even if we needed. But again, that's going to be determined by the development flex and who's doing the negotiating of the flex. Right, so if we asked for a step down in one neighborhood of 75% lot size to 75% to 75 down to their lot size, and then the next one we came back, well, 45 is okay. I don't know if having the definition in here when we don't mention it in the actual code anywhere will be confusing.
I think it'd be confusing, but my question was, it's not in the R1, and that was more where my question was coming in, if we were gonna,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that's where I was coming from.
Yeah, we settled on the larger lot size and moved the step down portion to the development flex, if that's gonna be needed. That gives somebody the opportunity to do smaller lot sizes, but they still have to respect the homes that are already built and established. So
And Daniel, when you say we decided, who was that?
that would have been P and D and steering committee. Lori was the one she said she never had anything like that put in to any of the codes that she had done before. Because if that were to be used, then the development flex would be used for that certain scenario.
And we can talk more about that in R1, because I have other thoughts on this.
Okay.
So we can wait. It doesn't need to be talked about now, but I've got other thoughts on it too, so we can move on.
Anything else? Definition section?
Mm.
Okay. Next part of this is the general provisions. Basically, general provisions put in there, apply zoning citywide, establishes minimum standards, helps clarify treatment of non-conforming uses and structures, and confirms that uses are not expressly permitted, are prohibited. Going through that, reviewing that.
So on page general provisions, 151.10, applicability, item number D, the last sentence of that. It says any existing building or structure and any existing uses or properties not in conformity with the regulations herein prescribed shall be regarded as non-conforming and may be repaired, maintained, replaced, and improved, but not expanded, subject to the special regulations herein provided with respect to non-conformity. So is that saying a person can't, if they do something to one part of the building, the rest of the building has to be brought into conformity? The building permit?
It would depend on what they're doing. So let's say, for example, you had a property and the house was, a foot off from the roadway, which obviously wouldn't be meeting your setbacks of today. They could maintain it, repair it. If for whatever reason it was, hit by lightning and burned down, they could rebuild it, same spot, basically exact same look as before, but they can't expand. So once they start expanding, that's when you guys can say, well, if you're expanding, you have to bring it into code. And so, one option would be they would, meet code somehow. So maybe the addition would be meeting the setback. The other option would be they'd request a variance. And so that obviously goes through Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately you guys for approval or denial. And so you get to check, does this make sense to keep it, not meeting code or does it not make sense?
Okay, great, thank you.
Anything else on that section? Kind of a shorter section there.
So that falls in line with 151.015,
Mhm.
item A, subdivision 5, where it says any addition greater than 50% of the square footage of the building shall require the entire building to meet architectural and control standards. Is that pretty standard too?
Yep. Yeah, so you guys as a city can kind of dictate how much you allow someone to alter nonconformity without triggering a variance. So let's say you didn't have that language in there. They would basically, anytime they touch it, they'd have to bring it into code compliance. This kind of gives someone a little bit of leeway if they're, you know, an older structure, older house, if you will, they can kind of.
But the 50% is pretty common, or?
I'd say that's a good threshold. It's kind of easy from a staff perspective to interpret, okay, this is half of, you know, what you're dealing with before. Whereas if you have a different percentage, it's kind of hard to nitpick or interpret, you know, how much they are altering it, for example.
No, nothing else. We'll move on to the next section here. This is our administration and enforcement section. This section really centralizes the zoning administration with the city administrator / zoning administrator, helps outline enforcement authority and incorporates the Minnesota 60-day rule for land use decisions, which were briefly talked about by Evan earlier. This is again, pretty standard language here, some of which we already kind of had, but just really spells it out how it, I think, should be.
The one thing on this section that I noted is it talks about the what, but I don't know, it doesn't get to like how we would enforce it. So if we're talking about like, what are the ramifications of the 60-day rule and the site plans review and relocation, there's nothing in there that talks about like the actual enforcement. It just gives you the timelines from our standpoint, but again, I know we've been in situations where things are not that we have to get legal and other things involved to actually enforce them or to stop or to take things down. So I don't know if we need to have any verbiage in any of those about the actual like enforcement plan.
Yeah, and Evan, maybe correct me, I think this would fall under looking at different sections of the code for the enforcement side of it. I just think of, you know, we've had problems at the Mary Nash House, for instance. There was a lot of zoning stuff that was wrong with it, but the enforcement action was put into from the different parts of the code is where it kind of came into what would happen. But are you talking about you know, what the steps are for, okay, you get your first code violation is this, your second code violation is this, and your third one's this, or I guess I'm trying to better understand what you're getting at.
Well, your 151.0 or 0.02 is talking about enforcement, so it's giving the city administrator, the zoning administrator, the responsibilities to do those things, but it doesn't get into the steps that would be taken if something is not followed in those, and even the subsequent, the 60-day rule, site plans and some of those, it doesn't get into anything about if they don't meet those criteria or plans for ordinance. There's nothing in there that shares what that path from an true enforcement would mean.
Yeah, so your 60-day rule doesn't necessarily apply to the applicant. It's actually more of a timeline that we, the city, would have to follow. So
Yeah, but your site plan, like some of those things, like I mean, we've had issues where things are not, and maybe we should reference codes, but that aren't up to code, and then people basically don't do anything.
yeah, so I think some of that language is more just kind of explaining what that is, you know, so what is a site plan? So when someone comes to the city hall and says, I want to build something, and they hand Jason a napkin with, scribbles on it, we can say, well, that's not a site plan. I think that's the purpose of that. And then you look at some of these later sections, those different requests, they require a site plan, for example, or they might require, build-in plans, if you're building a structure that are more detailed, showing how you're constructing it. So I think that language that you have in there initially is okay. So that site plan review, I don't see any issues with that. Public hearings just kind of states, again, the process that you guys as a city undertake whenever a public hearing is required. 60-day rule again is, just making sure that we're on top of things. Typically for the enforcement aspect, which is kind of what we were talking about as well, that is typically going to be, a lot of times will trigger a nuisance violation as well. And so there's usually two ways you can basically catch all, any zoning code violation is also nuisance. And so your enforcement policy under the nuisance code could be used, which is typically send out a notice or a letter of some sort. They have time to comply. If they don't, you guys get to dictate, whether we go to court essentially, or if there's some other remedy to enforce it. The other option would be maybe you could add some language in here, again, stating, we have a nuisance code violation process, and any violation in this ordinance would have to follow that process for enforcement.
Yeah, maybe right after D, we probably need an E to just call that out. I mean, because if you're talking about that section, right, it's talking about enforcement.
In section 151.148, which is the subdivision platting section. It talks about violations and penalties, but that's relative to subdivisions.
Correct. And so that might be where it'd be good in this section to kind of have just a blanket statement that says, any zoning violation. Basically enforce that through the nuisance code process.
It's also mentioned in the floodplain, but we're not talking about that either, so.
Yes. Yeah, so I think that's something we could easily.
So we want to have a comparable violations paragraph, it's A and B, put that into performance standards.
Which section are you pulling that from? 148.
148, yeah. It's in the subdivision planning,
Okay.
and it's back in here. But it's not in there's nothing in the performance standards. Silly. I'm sorry.
I think we need an E on the 151.020. That talks about the nuisance violation.
Okay. I'm okay with that. Look at that, I'm looking at the 148, I'm guessing we'll kind of mimic it off of that one, off of the violation and penalties. Something similar to that, that'll go in there.
Jason, as we go through here and we're asking for changes and edits, things that and things that you think that need to go back to Lori, I want you to call those out here.
Yeah.
If you can.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything that I think that we can
Yeah.
handle, so, but. We also have Evan here.
Yes. Yes, we also have that.
Was there anything else in this section that kind of?
That was in, here's the general provisions. I'm sorry, let's track here.
Administration.
Administration enforcement.
Administration, okay. Yes, on section 151.024 variances. Subdivision D. Subdivision 1, a complete application. This is in regard to required variance information materials shall be required for the application. It just says a complete application form signed by all property owners. In our current rules today, we say 350 feet. I think it'd be good to add that dimension.
So you want people neighboring the property to also sign the application? Is that what you're?
Within the 350 range.
Our current process is not having them sign it. Our current process is that we mail
Mail
them
out
a
the
set of variants.
Where-
And
Yes.
that actually
you're
is
right.
covered.
But they do,
Ryland, underneath 151,022, it's listing 500 feet for public hearings. And if you need a public hearing for a variance, that's already covered.
Yeah,
no, you're right. I misspoke about being the form signed, but there is the letter, but today the letter is 350 feet.
And this is saying 500.
500.
So do you want to basically raise it to 500 or do you want to keep it at 350? Maybe is the question for tonight.
What's
Well,
the rationale for going to 500 feet or 350?
Transparency, maybe?
Probably transparency. But we have,
That's why we got
we have
outside
big,
buildings.
we have
I was gonna
big
say, think
lots.
of it big lots.
We have really big lots, so if I.
Three hundred fifty is totally
variance,
sufficient
That's like
in town.
9 letters probably,
Mhm.
you know?
And 500, I
I've
think
seen
is
some
better.
where it's like 4 or 5 letters.
Yeah, I mean, we have big lot, I mean, not that 500 is gonna give you 2 more houses, but.
At least it's notification, which I think
Yeah.
is transparency.
That makes sense.
Let's see. One 151,028, the lapse paragraph. On page 10 of administration,
Can you say the chapter again?
151.028. Lapse. Question had if not approved. What happens if it's not approved? This doesn't really. We talked about the approval. It becomes null and void after 1 year. Unless prior to the expiration of 1 year, the work would be described as commenced and diligently pursued on the subject site. City council may grant an extension for a good cause, but.
They'd have to
Was that?
they'd have to reapply for the new site plan.
what would determine good cause on that?
If they're
There has to be
moving,
some kind of guidelines as to what the good cause would actually be referring to.
That usually left up to the commissions and council. I've never seen that defined, but that's usually a case by case basis.
Yeah, anyway, yeah.
I mean, it's hard to list every possible scenario, so I think it's typical for a lot of communities to just say good cause. So let's say there's a flood for, whatever reason, that would be good cause. But there's all sorts of things or situations that could come up, and it may be hard to list all those. Because if you do have a specific list, it might be hard to say, well, your issue isn't on the list, so therefore, we agree with you, but it's not on the list, so we can't give you an extension. So that's just kind of an easier way to say, well, if we as a council think this is a good cause, then it's okay.
I actually did have a question on that too. I saw in here, and Evan, you might be able to answer this. What does an administrative permit consist of? I've not seen that listed anywhere, and that it's not like we have zoning permits and variance permits. I don't know if those are considered administrative. I don't know what an administrative permit would be.
I'll say sometimes you might have a kind of like the equivalent of a zoning, I guess, license or permit that you might issue for like a fence or ADU, but I don't know if you guys necessarily have that anywhere else in the code, so maybe that's something that could have been deleted. I don't see anywhere else, actually. Let me double check.
Well, since it's not in the rest of our code, it probably, those two words probably shouldn't be in there.
Cause it's also in the revocation one, administrative permits listed again. So the two ones that I found right over there.
So I see a reference under,
What's it say under definitions?
There is none.
yeah,
Probably
but
just probably best to just remove it
although
for both sections.
I see in one section, the R1 zone, you have an accessory dwelling unit is allowed as an accessory use, consistent with some standards outlined, subject to approval of an administrative permit. So that's the only actual reference in your code to an administrative permit. But again, there's no definition, there's no permit process. You have every other permit listed. So maybe I would think that's something that should be removed.
Okay, I'd mark that in our ones when we get to it.
Yeah.
What's that number again?
It's in 028 and 030. Administrative permit is listed in both of those, so.
0 to 8 and what?
30.
030.
At the, under 151.032, zoning application fees deposits. And, the word escrow fees. And, I don't know when the right time to discuss the escrow versus what we currently have in place with our cost security agreement. No, I think what we have today, the cost security agreement, meets the needs. It meets a lot of needs. It's very comprehensive. Escrow fees are kind of, I'm not sure what would be in the escrow fees. There could be a lot of different things. But today we call it out as a cost security agreement, and it's very comprehensive. The process of how the developer uses it. And to me, my personal opinion, I think we should keep it the cost security agreement and we just replace escrow with cost security agreement
I worry
based on
about,
our experiences of using it and being accepted.
I worry about replacing it. Escrows, usually you see those a lot more in my understanding and experiences in big, I'm talking like, $100 multi-million-dollar facilities that are built. Or if we have commercial development in the south end where they're building say they build a giant grocery store that's gonna be, tens of millions of dollars, that's where you usually see the escrow fees put into place for that, just because of the sheer size of the project. We haven't really had something to that extent, so we've been able to get by with the development agreements. So I worry about taking out escrow fees. I think we should add.
Or a cost security
Yeah.
agreement in there where you have both of them that are
Yeah.
in there.
Because right now we do have some limits in the cost security agreement.
Yeah.
The development. So I think that would be just updated, improved when we get to the large commercial agreements.
Yeah, but I would hesitate removing it. We can add the other language though.
I would say just leave it as escrow fees because your cost security agreement is the same thing. You're holding that money in trust against what the fees are gonna add up to.
I understand what you're saying, Paul. I think that escrow is a term that's used a lot for a lot of things outside of our city developments, but I think what we have today, the cost security is very definitive and comprehensive and applies to covering our cost of whether it's our city engineering firm charges, so the city doesn't get charged with those. That's why it was doing. So it's very comprehensive. If we can leave it in there, I think that's good. It can still be used. We can update it as we get into the larger commercial projects. And it would be, is put together with our attorneys and our engineering firm. So I think that's why I like it. I think it served us well. And it gives the developer a clear understanding of what the expectations are of covering costs for their particular development.
Well, maybe one thing to add to it to clarify it would be make it also known as the cost security agreement.
I think that'd be a good.
Yeah, cause I also, I have some of the same concerns that Ryland has just from an administrative perspective. I'm just curious, and maybe Evan, you can clear up some of that, but I'm just curious if we move to doing something like escrow versus the in-house, kind of the way that we've been doing with the cost of security agreements. Does that limit administrative oversight if we move to like an escrow type situation? I'm just curious because we're still so small.
Yeah.
Right, and so we have a lot of, we still have a lot of relationship with our
Yes.
developers, right? And so I think that keeping that, and that kind of goes back to what Marie was talking about earlier too, is just transparency and working with residents and having a relationship, like, we're not that big.
Mhm.
I just feel like escrow is something maybe that we grow into later. Are we really at that point where we have to have that kind of verbiage? And what kind of administrative oversight does moving to escrow, does that limit us?
Is it as simple as adding a definition that escrow
Yeah.
can also mean cost security agreement?
I think initially, right now, we could just state kind of what Paul stated. We'll just, insert a sentence, maybe 2 sentences in this section, escrow payment also referred to as the cost security agreement. Just to kind of cover your current process. I think the idea or the goal of either one is to make sure that you guys aren't footing the bill for everything in the project. But there's obviously many ways that you can get to that. And so a lot of cities that are much larger in size use an escrow, which is probably why that language is inserted here, just because again, that's kind of, I'd say, a majority of cities in the state. But again, there's more than one way to do things. And so if you guys use the cost security agreement, you like doing that, it's working for you, let's keep it as is and just make as small a tweak in this section as possible. So that if you guys do change it and say, okay, we're gonna do escrows now, you don't have to go back and rewrite the section. So
That makes sense.
I think if we can just have a sentence, a couple words inserted in there, that'd be good.
Because we'll have to look at section B of that too, because in section B, it talks escrow payment, and then it talks about it being in the fee schedule as required by our fee schedule. We don't have escrow payment listed in our fee schedule, but we have the CSA stuff listed in there.
Exactly.
So-
So if we can just make a minor insertion in there, I think that would cover all your bases, make sure we don't have to rewrite everything. And then say you guys do want to change your administrative process, we don't have to come back in here and rewrite it again for you.
Because right now escrow is not in the definitions. And neither, of course, is cost security agreement is not in the definitions, so that's probably something we should add.
I don't know if you necessarily have to add it. Typically, if it's not defined, you use kind of like the dictionary or common definition. So obviously, it sounds like all of you guys know what escrow and cost security agreement mean. But if you want to add it in there, you certainly can.
If we're gonna put in the text, I think, because it is different than escrow. It's unique to our codes.
Yeah.
So at a very 20,000 foot level, I think we need just a 1 sentence or 2 sentences.
So we could add a definition and then, kind of like Paul stated, just insert that reference into this section.
Add a definition for cost security agreement
On
and
page 6.
add.
Just put it in parentheses and it's cost security, AKA cost security agreement.
And with that,
That'd be okay. Yeah, it's mentioned escrow throughout, but I think that would be, in my opinion, it'd be acceptable to do that. As Paul suggested.
Okay, anything else?
One thing I did find when I was reading through this, you guys do have what's called an interim use permit. I don't know if it's come up recently, but there was an ordinance passed a couple years ago creating that. It's not in your code now. I'm not sure if that's something that you guys discuss with the plan zone meetings or on the task force, but that is kind of another tool in the toolbox if you want to use it at some point. An interim use permit.
Instead of
Yes,
the
yeah.
cup, we had the IUP.
Mhm.
And there is a couple references in this draft document to interim use permit, so I think it may have been discussed at some point.
So I remember them talking about it during the steering committees.
Yeah. It's kind of like a CUP in that you can add or set conditions of approval. I guess, perks or unique things about an interim use permit is if it's something that you don't want permanent, you can set a time limit on how long that lasts. So that could be something as simple as we'd allow this for 1 year. You could also set something stating, once this person sells or ends the business, the permit expires. And so someone can move in and continue that use.
So somebody wants to build a shed that's over the square footage.
Yep.
You could say, instead of a variance, have an interim use permit. But the other stuff has to be torn down.
Yeah, that would be one way to
Completion
do
of
it.
it. Okay.
Or like say animal house boarding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Daniel, I would think instead of building sizes, 'cause you wouldn't want to be tearing the building down after it was up. It'd be more what the building was being used for.
Yeah, typically it's more like a use,
Okay.
or an activity. It's like, a dog or pet boarding business, maybe don't necessarily like that in a lot of spots, but maybe, you'd be okay with it temporarily. So that might be one instance you would use it. I see it a lot for like mines. Obviously, that's something you don't want permanently operating, but, maybe you'd give it a time limit of it can operate for this long. Once it expires, maybe they, mined as much as they can. They're ready to do some other sort of development. So it's kind of another option that you guys can utilize that may not come up a lot, but it might be easier to add that in now instead of once something comes in and you don't have that tool in your toolbox to use, you can't really add it in the middle of a request.
So can you clarify, is it standard that if somebody has a cup safe, like for the animal boarding house, right? And they sell or move, does the cup follow the property? So the buyer could, if there's no stipulation on the endpoint, does it transfer with the property?
It
doesn't
would
move?
run with the land.
Okay,
That being said, we'll double check in the section here, but typically a conditional use permit will end if the use has ceased operation for a certain amount of time. So typically if it hasn't operated for a year or more, it's no longer valid or active.
but not necessarily does it come to an end in a transfer of sale?
Correct. So say you had an auto dealership, for example, and that was a conditional use permit. Say that gets sold and bought by someone else, it would still be active, that permit. But say if that was an interim use permit instead, they would have to come back to you guys and maybe at that point you'd be like, well, we don't necessarily, want this use active anymore, and you could possibly deny it.
I'm just curious because sometimes the conditions in like a cup
Yep.
would be, again, I'm just using this as an example, animal boarding house, say their cup says they can have up to 30 animals,
Yeah.
they can only have animals from this time to this time, whatever. They sell,
Mhm.
the cup follows the land or the next
Yeah.
owner, and all of a sudden now there's 60 dogs up there and they're open at 6 AM instead of 8 AM. Like, how do you, how do we deal with something like that?
One way you would address that is when you initially issue the conditional use permit, you might set a limit of how much they can do. So for that example, if you have a dog boarding facility, you might set the limit at, 30 dogs. And if they want to have boarding space for, 100 dogs, they'd have to come back and amend that permit, which again goes to the plan and zoning and then council for approval. I wouldn't necessarily have time limits in your CUP. Basically, once it ends for a certain amount of time, it expires, but that interim use permit gives you that explicit authority to set some sort of.
Would it be wise or do other people say in their cup agreements that it would expire on the transfer of sale?
And Mel, just so you know, when we did that over here at the boarding house, if there was, I think they came back in and got a
They did.
new. So
They did, but they were the same owner and they were responsible saying, we're changing the way that we're doing business. We want to make sure that's okay with you. I'm just thinking like if it were sold and someone else came in and just started operating differently, right? There's, I don't know how the city
Yeah.
then maintains or keeps track of or goes back to say to them, you have X amount of time to
Mhm.
comply or, I don't know, like, is there verbiage? Can you put that in the agreement that says
You
that
could.
if, and it doesn't follow the land, like if it's a transfer of sale, it's over and the next person has to come in and say what their intention is with the business and what, and then we re-approve those intentions.
You could put in language stating if it ceases for a certain amount of time, it expires, but technically the CUP would run with the land. So you can't say, well, if you sell it, we want to look at it again. We don't have
So
that
the
authority,
city
but
really needs to be paying attention to any kind of transfer of sale for a property that has a cup.
yeah, I would say, you know, whatever active or issued CUPs, it's always obviously good to keep track of what those are. Are they active? Are they, you know, adhering to those conditions that you have? But again, when a use comes up, which I think we're getting to the table in the next section with all the uses, that's where you'd want to go through and be like, we want this as a conditional use. Does it make sense in this zone? Is this something we don't want to allow? Because in theory, if they meet all those conditions for a CUP, you really have to grant it. There's not a lot of leeway to say, well, I don't like it, but it's allowed here. I want to deny it. Basically, if they meet it, you have to issue it. So
Right.
I think this is obviously a good process to go through and determine, you know, do we like this use as a conditional use? Do we not maybe like it as a conditional use? And so,
Just trying to think ahead of
you know,
how you plan to follow it.
yeah, and I think hopefully when we go through the table, we'll kind of figure out if all these uses make sense, but obviously if there's some of you guys are a little uncomfortable saying, well, if we don't want this to be permanent, maybe that's where interim use would make sense. So
Good.
the enforcement is always the fun part of, you know, tracking and following up with everything.
The conditional use permits is in 151.026. Before what we're talking about here, so, I don't see anything. Glancing through it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can add something about conditional use and interim use permit, wherever you think that's appropriate, add in here.
Well, I've got it to add it in the definitions, an IUP. And it sounds like it's already referenced in other parts of the code.
It is,
so-
I did a search through there. There is insertions of it elsewhere. So
Perfect.
I checked in, or I don't see it in the codes today.
Well, even with the animal boarding place, you know, that has like a 4 or 5 year permit on it, doesn't it, for the conditional use permit?
Yes, we need to stop
Yeah,
talking about the dog place.
I'm sorry, as an example, I was not picking on them like I have an issue with them. I was just using
No.
them as a good example of.
No, I guess I'm not saying anybody has an issue with it. It's kind of a good example, but maybe, you know, with the residential development around there, maybe that in all reality, an interim use permit would be a better use for that as development moves along in the city. You know, we
I
might
would
not.
say it's something to consider, because I do know Jason and I were made aware that they do want to come in and do, they do need to re-up their cup. We actually just talked to Isaac about this maybe a week or two ago. So we're gonna be working with them on coming forward with what they want to do next, which is ironic and totally unrelated. Still, I didn't mean to use them as the best example or a poor example at all. But if we're talking about IUPs, maybe that's something they would want to consider.
Yeah, the interims are used in sections 151.030 and 31.
it's their initial code.
2 years ago.
What was that reference number, Rylan?
151.030 and 0.031.
Yeah, so my guess is it started out in the draft and through whatever discussions got removed at some point, but I think it might be good to add back in, so if we again go through those uses and you guys are uncomfortable with stuff, you know, we can have that option.
More definition and
Yep.
just being included with everything else.
Yeah,
And we'll have to kind of look for that then.
yeah.
So, okay. Anything else?
On that section.
Okay. Let's move on to the next chapter here, next section, I should say, general districts provisions. This kind of goes into zoning district framework. This has the use table. It helps establish zoning districts, adopts the official zoning map, and provides a master use table that outlines where the uses are permitted by right versus requiring what is conditional approval.
So, I guess it's like a good starting point for the discussion regarding development flex. It's in section 151.035, establishment of districts. Today, as we know, we have the PUD. And the development flex would replace that. So I've got a couple concerns, I guess, from the standpoint, and it's talked about several times in my conversations with Lori, that it's just like a development, it's just like a PUD, but there are certain differences, but the way we do PUDs and how all of our applications forms, our staffing, I think it might be true, it might be easier down the road, but given our staff levels and the way we've done things, not that we can't change, but I just think the timing of picking up something, a different nomenclature, I guess is a better way to say it. It's something I feel like the PUD is very well established. Development flex is not in any Minnesota statutes. PUD is mentioned, and I just think it's something worthy of discussion I know a lot of time has been spent talking about it. It's something that Lori was involved with for a lot of years in Blaine where she was working. And I respect that, but I just, for our particular application, to me, I think it's a PUD would be something to keep in place. Or familiarity with the developers we have used and are going to be going forward with our engineering firms that we have that work with the different sites. I just feel like it's
If
a lot of changing and training for our staff to understand too.
If it's the same, then why does it matter if it's called one or versus the other? Like, what's the difference between the two of them? My understanding is that the development flex would allow flexibility, and any changes then that were agreed upon would then have to come back. If changes were made, would have to come back to planning and zoning to get reapproved if they wanted to change. Is that the same as the CUP, or does the CUP, I believe the way it was explained to me is the CUP then becomes administrative changes. So if they just get something approved and make a change, then it's administrative changes. It doesn't necessarily have to come back for a vote to change. So the developmental flex brings it back, any changes back.
Well, what I liked about the development flex part of it was that a development comes in, they have to establish everything that there is that's going to be in that development from the very start. Okay, and it isn't going in the, first phase, second phase, third phase, which is where changes take place. And even though it was meant to be that way, as it goes into the different ones, that's when you have changes that pop in, where a developer will say, well, I'm going to sell this off to this part of it. But under development flex, it's all laid out that we know exactly what the materials are, what the houses are going to look like, where they're going to be set. And those things were more important than what it is. So as a city, it gives us an ability to see up front and not to have changes that are made halfway in between when that developer wants to sell the other part of the development off. And that's where the concern is, that it's all got to be done the right way up front. And this is what we have, which is what I like. I think that's better for the city.
I understand the flexibility of watching and not controlling or making sure it does something doesn't get different than what was approved. But today, a person comes in with a preliminary plan and it comes to P&Z and council and gets approved as a preliminary plan. But before they can start building anything, there's a final plan that comes in for the same, and correct me if I'm wrong even, but for the same area that the preliminary plan comes in, the final plan comes in with more definitive details that's not in the preliminary plan.
This is looking at the whole thing. So when you come in, and so if you look at like what Hamilton was doing, they had different phases that they were going into. And so Hamilton could come in, and I'm just using that for an example, that they say, okay, we're gonna do phase one. And so they start doing phase one, all of a sudden they said, okay, I'm gonna sell out phase two and phase three to another developer. Then you lose what the original plan was, because that other developer can change what he has doing it. And so with the development flex, that has all gotta be maintained the same from the very start. So we see what's gonna be there, and that's what they have to maintain all the way through their development. So it gives you that confidence of what it's gonna be, where it's not gonna be changed halfway through the system. So, I mean, they can come in with their preliminary, they can do but it still has gotta be the final development flex that we see and we approve as council.
So right now,
I just,
your planning and development process, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You have two steps. You have the preliminary plan, which comes through plan and zoning and you guys, correct? And then if you approve that, they have that final plan, which again goes through plan and zoning and you guys for final approval. So the development flex zone, a little different, but kind of the same process. What they have in here right now, so in 151.082, they note that a developer would have to present a concept plan. That just goes to the zoning administrator right now. And then say the concept plan is okay with the criteria that are listed in the previous section, then they could then submit a formal application. What you could do maybe to kind of mimic your current process is that concept plan could go first through planning and zoning, and then maybe to you guys, give you that kind of initial review. And then if you guys are okay with it, then they would have that, again, formal application of officially, hey, this is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna do it. So that might kind of give you the best of both worlds, for example.
I worry about that because a lot of times we get them in there, they're not ready to have all of that before they've made their application. You get some of them that they've got a concept, but they don't want a public to go through that.
Well, you could do a concept and I guess not have a public hearing. You could just have it informal. And so you guys would just review the criteria.
drawing there.
Yep. Yeah, and so right now in 151.081, that's all the criteria you have for your development flex zone. And so you can kind of run it with what we've done now for PUD is you'd have staff go through, do you think it meets all these criteria? Plan zone go through, do you think it meets all this? And then ultimately, do you guys as the council think all these criteria are met or not? You can kind of give direction at that point, and then they would then have the direction and, you know, wherewithal of knowing, do we meet this? Do we not? Is there stuff we need to fix or amend for you guys? And then they can come back with, again, that formal plan set and have all their details ironed out, presumably at that point. And then you can kind of dictate on, you know, if you want to formally approve or not at that point. So that might be one way to kind of balance what you have now. But again, kind of have that new process and enshrine it as a zoning district as just a CUP as it is now.
But today, correct me if I'm wrong, but the preliminary plan comes in, it's, let's just, for example, the condo project, the Dragon's working on.
Yep.
He's identified what he wants to do as a preliminary plan. We've approved it. So we're waiting for a final plan.
Yep.
So he comes in with a final plan for all 14 buildings. However, he's just gonna do he's gonna build phase one first with 4 homes or 4 buildings. And depending on how that goes, he'll continue on with phase 2 and 3. But because he sent us a final plan and that's what we approved, he really can't change phase 2 or phase 3 or sell it off.
Mhm.
So really, what we currently have today,
We could sell it off, but it would be contingent to the plan.
well, it's still, it would have to come back to council and allowing,
So you could sell it, but whoever would inherit it or buy it would have to adhere to that plan.
Right. Or come and,
or keep the plan that's in place.
Yep.
or they could apply to
Amend.
amend it,
Correct.
which then would come back through
Basically the same.
the process all over again. It wouldn't skip steps.
The only reason that I think that there's something to be said for it, the way that we're doing it right now, where it comes through admin first, is because we have both seen
Yes.
some very lacking, people think they have a plan, right, or their idea of a plan, but they're severely lacking, and to not waste the time of planning and zoning, or to have them directly go to planning and zoning before it's seen by admin or questions are being asked, or we're having the planner review it, or we're having the engineer look at it to say, you know, are there other easements or things that we should be worried about that exist here, before it goes to P and Z. I think it's been really beneficial for a lot of that stuff to move to P and Z with sort of like an oversight from admin. It usually comes with a recommendation letter that the city planner's already kind of reviewed it, or engineering has already looked at it, and you guys feel a little bit safer about moving forward with it and not having to do some of that, the initial investigative work that usually happens before it comes to you. That's the only place I get hung up with it. If the new,
So where is the cost security agreement coming in before you guys start
it is
having him?
exactly
research
that.
all of it.
It is exactly that. It's covering our time for our investigation, our review.
Right.
It's covering the cost to have it go through him before it ever even gets to you. A lot of the times we're finding incompleteness, right? Like the application is missing things, or the setbacks aren't there, or there's all sorts of little ditty stuff that we're doing way before it ever comes
Yeah.
to planning and
And I
zoning.
think the way that it's written here is saying that it goes to you first and then comes to,
Yeah, all I'm saying is that there's just definitely a bonus to that, not to waste your time and just to keep the ball moving. Because a lot of times too, they think, oh, we have a hearing, we're getting to planning and zoning, here we go. The ball is rolling.
Yeah.
We don't want to set that ball rolling too far in advance for them. Once we schedule them a hearing, they feel like they're actually making progress. You know,
I believe the cost security agreement usually starts after the preliminary plan has been reviewed, because we haven't had really had any input into it.
Mhm.
So as the final plan is being developed, and going to our engineering staff or to get feedback, that cost security is the first thing we do before we start having that interaction.
Right.
So it covers our costs, so the taxpayers aren't paying.
Especially if they don't go through with the project, or if it gets denied or something in planning and zoning, right? The work that we already have into it, the review that we've already had done through consultants, planners, engineers, all that stuff, those costs are covered. That's the only point I wanted to make, yeah.
The other thing too is, as what Grant was saying before, when we were talking about step up, step down. And we talked about development flex type situation. Those are the things that we were looking at to make sure that things fit in. You know, and if you don't have that development flex, then you're looking at having to go a different direction that there is for step up, step downs, everything that there is that are associated with it to make it fit into what the current, you know, architectural is or current buildings that they're doing, so.
So the concern I raised earlier basically hinges on the fact that the night that we discussed, we talked about a step down from like lot adjacent to current 20,000 foot square foot lots, we'll just call it out. That the next kind of step down would be anything close to them or adjacent to them would be the 20,000 and then the 14,000 after that. So a true step down. The way I understood what you were saying earlier, Daniel, is that because we went to bigger lot sizes, essentially we would be treating those adjacent lots, those 14,000, the standard, as the step down, and then using this development flex based on this subsection A here, that the proposal shall provide a wider range of housing types, price ranges, and styles that could be accomplished under the existing zoning. So essentially what I'm hearing then is the step down now turns into the standard lot, and then the R1 is a flex zone, and everything can be smaller and just kind of go from there. That's my concern, is I think that it's different than what we talked about at P and Z.
so if they want to go to smaller lot than 14,000, then the step down would, like I said, you were talking about step downs like half, going from a 2 acre to a 1 acre. That's what development flex allows, is for us to dictate that step down. We can require a step down from a 2 or a 4 acre lot to 50% of the adjacent lot, or whatever we determine. But putting it in, I guess putting it in just complicates things quite a bit. But if somebody wanted to develop much smaller lots, they would still have to respect that step down that we would put in place to approve the developmental flex. So.
So what I'm hearing you say though is the step down is the new standard, is the new standard lot size of 14,000 is the way that this sounds to me.
So if they wanted to build out an entire development at 14,000, that would be allowable. But if they wanted to drop, 80% of the lots down to 7,000, that's where they would have to rezone to development flex. And that's where P and Z council can determine that there is a significant step down from the current lots to that smaller lot size that they want.
So wouldn't the variance currently today to do what you talked about, they'd have to come in with a variance to go with the
No,
smaller lots?
they would rezone from R1 to a developmental flex zone
In the new world.
in this.
Yeah.
And then once that development flex, then they can request whatever they want, but we can approve and request whatever we want. So if we want 1 acre lots, stepping down from 2 acre lots that are already existing, and then those 1 acre lots have to step down to half acre lots to get to the 14 or to get to the 7. That's what development flex allows us to do, is to actually.
And the rule on.
Yeah. And it's not a standard, so what would happen in one development might not be the exact same as what happens in a different development on the other side of 52 that needs a different type of consideration.
So I get that, but I guess going back to my earlier comment to the definitions, tying this all back together, I know I'm jumping around a lot here, but then shouldn't there be some kind of call out either within the flex lots or up in R1 talking about council has oversight on instrumenting or implementing a step down that's greater than 14,000, something like that? Because I guess the way I read this right now is that if it's R1 and it doesn't matter where it's at, that standard lot size is 14,000.
Yes.
And if they're there, then like your example of 2 acres down to 1, it's kind of irrelevant because if it's R1 already, they can just go in and put a 14,000 square foot lot in there, and that 1 acre lot is out the window. We never had any oversight over that. So I guess that's where that step down there, to me, there's some language being in there. There's protection in that to protect the current homeowners.
That's why when we were talking about it, the original number was 10,000 square foot lots.
And we bumped it to 14 and then talked about a 20,000 step down for adjacent,
But we left the step down portion out when we bumped it to 14, was my understanding.
But we went back to the development flex, the DF.
But
Okay.
we went back to the development flex.
That was, we didn't let P and Z that night. It was gonna go to city council to talk about the step down and the 14,000 foot lot. So that was the only reason I was bringing that up, because this was not seeing step down in here was news to me based on what we talked about. And again, if that's city council's governing body, if that was what we decided, that's fine. But I just want to call that out, that was my understanding leaving that meeting. And it never came back.
And that's not the way that I remember it. I remember it raising it up to the 14,000 from the 10, getting rid of the step down language and.
I think we were looking
leaving
at
the
also,
developmental flex in.
we were going from 20 to 10,000, which was basically cut in half. And we
Yeah.
said, well, that's just a little bit too small. We wanted to go up to a little bit larger lot. Just because of what we have in the community and what the community wants to have and the way they want to have it look. I'm in agreement with the step down part of it that there is, and I'm looking also at River Park too, where you're at, that if you were gonna subdivide, what you've got over there for the drain field, you'd like to have those lots the same size as what your current lots are, which I think would be good for the residents that are there to have it be the like type situation.
Yeah, consistent.
And that's what you want to try to keep is that uniformity that there is, instead of going down to 10,000 over there. But I'm just saying, it's looking at that to try to have it. Your situation where you're at, I can see the step down because that was a part of what was basically agreed upon when you turned around and bought your property of what was said at that time. And again, I'm taking a look on the other side of 52, where you might have an open farm that's over there that could be developed. That the 14,000 might be great on the outside part of it, and then you might want to go down to 10 on the inside. You know, to make it where you could use that DF type situation that there is and be able to get a little bit more in there by that type of situation. So I can see both.
That again, so those butt up against our houses, and that would be a huge issue for a lot of people on the what is it, west side of the town. So again, I think we need to have that conversation because again, I want to make sure that we're being transparent. This is a hot topic for a lot of people. A lot of people move to Orinoco to have larger lots. They don't want, you know, apartment buildings and really small single family homes in their backyards. And there's a place for it, but again, to Grant's point, like we need to think about where they can be located and not just put them on a DF because that leaves it up to interpretation. And if we're trying to do this right and set ourselves up for being scalable, like we should be calling some of these out because otherwise we're going to have to do development flex or rezoning all the time.
One of the things that was talked about during the development of Riverwood Hills and Cedar Woodlands is they started out with the larger lots, and the closer they worked to the major right of ways, the lot sizes would become smaller. So I guess I kind of see some point, but I think you'd want to keep the lot sizes close to the larger lots that are there that exist today. You'd want to keep them stepped up fairly good. Then the closer you get to 100th Street or the closer you get to Minnesota Avenue, they can get a little bit smaller. But you know, the Minnesota Avenue side, that probably wouldn't work so good. We're looking at there's different stuff going in there than single family residence. But for the west side of the highway, you know, I don't see any reason you couldn't have 10,000 or 7,500 foot lots out down along 100th Street in the future. But that's when somebody decides to develop it.
I mean, that's township land anyway, and it's zoned agriculture, so they would have to bring it in and rezone it. So again, it's probably not worth talking about, but again, I just want to be aware, right? People moved out here because they wanted space. They don't want what's happening in Rochester in their backyard.
Well, it is worth talking about, Marie, because when it comes to the property your last house sits on, that was agriculture. It was brought into the city too.
Yep, I agree.
You're having a good point, Marie, and I agree 100% what we're trying to do and what you're looking at, and for the value of your neighborhood that's there, the way that was put in as well.
But it's not just my neighborhood though. Like it's happening on the west side and the east side. Like
Exactly.
So it's not just my neighborhood. I don't want that to come across that this is just for Marie, because that's not the point. Like my point is people moved out here for a reason. They like what they have, and we have to be sensible about where these things fit. And there's places for it. There's places within our city that we could allow for that, but we shouldn't just do it and put it on, I mean, rezoning all the time to do that, because there's not going to be any consistency and there's no transparency of where it fits within our city plans for residents. And that's what they're worried about, right? Because there is nothing called out. So they're feeling like anyone can buy it and they can do whatever they want with it. I mean, that is the perception of what's happening out in Orinoco, because we aren't clear of where things fit within our land use and our ordinances.
I'm okay with the step down. I thought the development flex made it easier and with the wording, but if everybody is strongly wants the step down wording in there, I'm fine with that.
I guess I have two comments about what Marie is saying. I hear from residents what Marie hears, like, we've all heard it, right? I think Marie's point to the 14,000 lot size is, let's call out the elephant in the room, like everyone says, there's a place for it. Where? Where is the place in Orinoco that we think that high density housing at 14,000 square foot lots or 7,500 square foot lots would be appropriate? Where are we thinking that area is? Because I am pretty sure that most of the neighbors or neighborhoods that one or two or three of us might mention are going to disagree with that. So when we say there's a place for that, where is that place? And then my other question is, let's get real. We know that any developer that's gonna come in here and wanna do developments is gonna wanna get the maximum amount of development in a small space, right? They are definitely gonna wanna go for that 14,000 square foot lot or smaller. So whether they do a setback or however we end up doing development flex, we are going to end up constantly rezoning stuff like Marie says. Because they're gonna wanna take advantage of development flex. They're gonna wanna get as much housing built and as much development as they can in the smaller lots. So I just worry, are we creating a situation for ourselves down the road that's gonna be hard to manage?
And the way that I understand that the development flex works is it actually allows for that. So if they want 7,000 square foot homes down by Second Avenue, they can drop down to that. They could have over half of that field be 7,000 square foot homes, which would be the exact same number of homes or
That are there.
14,000 square
Right.
foot, but now they have to build X number of large lot homes as well
Yeah.
for those step downs. So
I get the idea of it. I'm just curious, like, I'm just with the transparency and like, I'm just trying to think about it from a resident's perspective.
Mm.
You know, like, what neighborhoods and what areas and where are we thinking that those size lots or those
So Daniel,
more high density areas, where are we thinking about putting them? If we're making plans to do it, where are we gonna apply it? What's the vision?
I'd be cautious using the word high density. That's not high density.
Well, you know what
Thousands.
what I'm saying is when I'm speaking like that, what I'm saying is this is what the residents are saying,
I know.
right? Anything that's smaller than 2 acres that they moved out here to have, that's how they're viewing
But
it.
that's a feeling versus fact, and I don't wanna get those confused, because that's where we end up in a lot of problems as communities. People have strong feelings, which is great. But then they're confused with what is factual. That is not high density. So we wanna make sure we are using the right terms there, so it's transparent and understood. So that's why I just wanna make sure we're caution on using that.
Got it.
so Daniel, one clarification piece based on what we were just talking about. So you mentioned after P and Z. Earlier you mentioned that it went back to the steering committee and then it was talked about at council. And then now we were just kind of talking that when I left P and Z that night, you mentioned that we went with the bigger lot sizes, but with the flex. So now based on that, if we didn't use a step down as part of that flex process, they were, there's no flex option though to create a step down greater than 14,000, I guess is what I'm getting at. Because you mentioned again, going to that,
they would have to apply for the DF. So DF is a zone just like R1 is a
right.
zone. So right now,
so R1 would shift to a DF essentially.
correct.
Yes,
And at that point, it would be up to administration, P and Z council to say, I mean, we have these homes that are an average of, an acre and a half. So we need a step down for this first row of homes. And that has to be big a number, 50%, 60% of that lot size. And then they can step down from 60% of, or 50% of that number. And then they get to wherever they're trying to go to. So it would still be probably a buffer of, like in a DF situation, it would still be a it would. The means to the end is different, but the end it would be the same, I guess is where I'm going. So the verbiage, the problem, I think with adding the step down in, the verbiage in is what I'm just looking at is what is considered an adjoining lot? Is it one that's directly across an established road? What if there's a tree line? What if there's a big berm? Is that a conjoining lot? Like, so I think that's where the confusion of putting that into the actual R1. And then again, this is just how I understood it from Lori's explanation, because initially I was against the DF completely. But once she explained that it gives us the freedom to allow a developer to come in and do what they want as long as they meet the requirements that adjoining residents are requesting, because that's what it's going to come down to.
But I guess wouldn't that be the same process if you put a step down in there? And because again, if that step down is in there, like you said, there's some ambiguity around what is adjacent.
Right.
Because like you said, tree lines, things like that, what do they have to apply for? I guess to me, if they had that step down and the builder wants to do something different than what's currently adjacent to them, because that all goes through anything that's within 500 feet now, comes up for public hearing. So at least you have that opportunity to listen to the people of the town and hear what they have to say, I guess is my concern, because this lack of step down in the verbiage and just the clarification there opens up a lot of, I think, opportunities for builders to do, like I said, that whole 14,000 square foot. My thought that night was that there was a step down from adjacent properties down to 14,000. And now it sounds like that could essentially be the step down is 14.
So R1 is how it's written in here. And again, this is where this is all up for conversation tonight. The way it's written right now is R1 is 14,000. So if they want,
There's
if they
no step
came
down.
in and they're like, that's R1 and we'll do 14.
Yep.
But that's still, what, 0.4 acres, something like that. That's still almost half an acre lot. I mean, that's still a big lot, but, it's 0.46 acres.
Maybe one thing to consider I kind of have to agree with Grant on the step down process. Maybe one way to look at it would be to require anything within 500 feet of the 40,000 foot lot or the 20,000 foot lot requirements would have to be the 14,000 foot lots. And it'd have to be at least going 500 foot increments before they could step down anything else. That way development flex couldn't take over and put 10,000 foot lots on there. Just one way of looking at it, maybe.
And I'm okay with putting the verbiage back in for step downs. I just thought that it would be encompassed completely in the DF and give us a little bit more flexibility on what we could do. Because it'll have to be a percentage, right? We'd have to write it in as a percentage. So a step down of, again, 50% of what the average of the lots. So, I mean, the average of the 6 lots is in your instance is 1.27 acres.
So we're already below that 50% mark, I guess, just thinking about it personally. So yeah, when you said that, that's why I was kind of going down that path, because again, going back to previous comments of initially moving out here, it was with the understanding that it was 20,000 foot lots around us. So it is what it is. So the 14,000 is now below that. So that's where that step down came in, I thought, that night when we talked about it. So
Yeah, and again, we would still have to come up with a number of what that step down is, because if we say it's a 70% step down, the whole establishment's gonna be a step down. Like,
Right, but alongside that, you should probably give it a distance away from what currently exists as the larger lots. That'd give a buffer of protection.
So how do we write that in, I guess, is the concern.
it would be anything within 500-foot lot,
Yeah, that's
500
nuts.
foot couldn't be under a certain size.
Standing on that, Jason, we've already been talking to them, so are we contracting them to make the decision, or are we contracting them to advise us?
Our contract is over with them, so any changes we make.
But we're gonna look at recontracting with them, but we're setting in exactly what we wanna have.
That's
the-
my point.
The finished new part of that contract, if we wanna do that, so.
I think the other thing to think about is we need to write it in there, but I think we also need to put it on the map so people know where these step down, and if we're gonna do development flex, where they would go. Because right now it's unclear to me when looking at the map where these spaces would even go. And I speak for probably many people that live here, they're gonna look at the map, they're not gonna pull up the ordinance. So again, just a visual person, so I know I get we need to write it and have some of that language, but we also need to show our residents on the zoning map where some of these step down and or DF zonings are gonna go.
I agree with that.
So you wanna pre-designate areas of town to be DF or step down required? So that would either,
This is just Marie's feeling, but yes, I think that's what people are looking for in terms of clarity, because right now it could be anywhere.
So I have a question with this. I'll play devil's advocate here. I've got a development, we've got a step down, we build it down, and now I've got another half of the development. Say, we got established to the east, development to the west of it, of the established stuff, we step down. And then to further west, I've got another development, but I say, you know what, I wanna make these 3-acre lots in R1. Now we've screwed over and we've gotta start over a new step down process somewhere. How does that work? Cause the developers, I mean, they don't have to make them 14,000, they can make them
Anything.
20, 50, 60,000 square foot lots, whatever they want to, and still qualify under that R1. So I don't know that we can really define, this is a step down area, because they can make them what they want to. That's where I think we're gonna get into a lot of problems trying to really be that on the point of this is how this is. That's why when you build the districts, the R1s, R2s, you set the minimums of this is what the minimum is. You need to meet that, and then if you can't, that's where you come in for your variances, your development flex, or whatever process wants to be put in place.
and so that's a good point, but that just brings something else up. Who's to say that Dragon's condos aren't going to be immediately adjacent and then have to be averaged in to that step down?
But it's
It's
R2.
R2 though.
Is that one of that? Okay,
That's
that's
our-
right.
So that's already set.
The other point is.
It's also one lot,
Any-
it's not
Any
separate
one
lots.
of these lots, whether we designated EF now or R1 now, in a few years when none of us are on council, can be rezoned to a different, if it's not developed. A different council can rezone it. So again, I'm okay with the step down. I just don't know how to do the verbiage of it.
And maybe we could ask Lori about that. I mean,
I don't know that I'm also willing to pay another $40,000 to Lori.
and I'm not saying that, maybe we can work a deal or come up with something else that's.
So some background, back in 2022, P and Z asked Stantec to put together, Bill Larson, proposed updates to lot size limits with completion of water sewer project. The reason that was done because our comprehensive plan, even though it was 2006, identified we needed density to pay for the plant. And to pay for the plant, we need the density. That's very clear. And so they put together a proposal. I just have one copy here. But they went in and they surveyed all the different cities around here. And it's in the report here that we can, Sub Rhoda, 11,000 residential, 7,500, depending on the lot. We have the Rochester Pine Island, It's in the report, but what they did, they proposed a intermediate lot sizes, which is basically like the 43 acres of 8,000 square feet, I think it was. And the larger areas was 10,000 and 6,000 down in downtown area. So there has been an effort, even though it's 4 years old or more, that how we would identify what we're kind of talking about, the different areas. So we talk about minimum, and I know that I apologize again for being too dense or not figuring it out, but when I see your development flex, when that preliminary plan comes in for approval for 43 acres, we know what's being proposed and nothing's gonna change. If they come back with the final that meets everything for that 43 acres, it's gonna stay in place. There's nothing changing. And what you're saying with the development flex is, it can change. And I just don't see that. We
But
don't,
it has to go back through,
Yeah.
has to go back through all of the, public hearings, everything, to change it.
to change it. So
Yeah.
why would a developer do that when he's figured his cost, of what it's gonna take to pay for his infrastructure?
Yep.
To put in, say, all 10,000 lots versus 10,000, maybe he wants to spend 20,000. You know, the lots we have at 20,000, 10, 15 years ago was great. And that's an anomaly right now. I mean, it can still be done, but the developer is gonna pay a lot more money for that. And it's not gonna give us the density to support our wastewater treatment plant and facilities based on the cost that we have. And so we need the density. And 14,000 is not gonna get us density. If you look at 14,000 compared to 10, 12,000, 10,000 square feet, if you look at those lots, those square footages, and each of those have 120-foot depth. A 14,000 square foot is 117 front width, 12,000 is 100, and 10,000 is 83. 83 is very common, and 100 is very common for what we have in Riverbend Estates. You have 17 homes up there, and 13 of them or 7 of them are less than 100 feet, and then 83 feet. They're all $700,000 homes. So that's what the developer's looking for, the dollars. He's investing to eliminate his infrastructure to fit a nice size house. But if you look at a 15,000 square feet, 120-foot depth, you can build 45 homes. If you look at a 10,000 square foot lot, you can build 64 homes. So a developer can build 33% more homes with 10,000 versus 14,000.
I think what we're hearing from residents are they don't want that number right up against
Well,
development.
that's not what your
already
steering committee
exists.
said. Your steering committee came to your August P and Z and you started out with 10,000 square feet.
Well, we
And in the
agree.
August meeting, he says, well, let's talk about 12,000. Okay, 12,000 is the recommendation. You come back in September and P and Z says, no, let's do 15,000 because that sounds good and that gives us the uniqueness of the city. Uniqueness of the city is not going to help pay the plant. And I think that's, as a city, as a council, we need to keep that in perspective. We got a comprehensive plan and we need to be focused and keep that in mind, that these minimums are minimums. If a developer wants to do 20,000 lots, he can do it. But it's going to limit the number of homes that can be built. That's a developer's choice. He can decide if he wants to spend the money for the infrastructure or we come in with a minimum of 10,000, and 10,000 is a very reputable lot. It's nice size homes can be put on it. And I guess the point I'm getting back to is that when the preliminary plan comes in, the developer knows what he wants to do, and that's what he's gonna ask when he comes to the council and P and Z. This is what I want to do in my 43 acres or 10 acres, whatever the case may be. So a development flex is something I think it's nice to have probably, but I just think it leaves a area of unknown, in my opinion, of what it really means. Because if you look at the first sentence of the criteria in 151.081 criteria,
Okay, before we get going, we're jumping way ahead of what we
Yeah,
are
we're
trying to
way-
do, so I would like to get us back on track here.
Yeah.
Because we are going down the rabbit hole of R1 and development flex. Development flex is next week's discussion. And I want to try to get us through the rest of this, and we're still trying to talk about the provisions and the chart here for the acceptable uses in this section. And then we can get into R1 a little bit, because we're already hitting the 2 hour mark. So I'd like to continue on with this. It's good discussion, but I think we're jumping out of order, and I just want to try to get through some of this stuff. So
Good, Jason.
if we can just kind of look over again, section starting with 35, and running through 39, 40. 39 is that use table. You'll see that in the copy that's posted online here, the draft copy. It shows what all the different uses are, whether it is a permitted use, an accessory use, or a conditional use represented by the different lettering, EAC, and different zones. Anything that stood out in this section, to anybody?
Quads were not listed in the 151-039 use table. Yeah, single family, 2 family, and 3 family, but quad was not listed.
Okay.
I think it's important that it be part of, it's a permitted R2, of course. But I think it's listed in the shoreland and the floodplain, so I don't know why it wouldn't be listed here. And based on what we have in process now of quads.
Yep.
On the use table, Jason, so the home occupancy, and the private garage, why is there a P and like a permit use and conditional use? Like, why is there an option? Or is it both? Like, why aren't we picking which one needs to be?
I think it can be either or depending on the circumstances.
Should we be clear though? I mean,
I think that's during decision time, that's where it's made clear. This just kind of gives the overall guidance of this can be permitted or this can be considered a conditional use. And then as we come through and it gets presented to council, we'll provide whether it's a conditional or permitted use.
Yeah, I think basically if you're under a certain size for a building, that's where it might be accessory, but if it's over a certain size, that's where it'd be conditional, so.
should we separate those then?
We could.
I think the other thing, not to bring us back to what we were just talking about, but is there a reason why we're intentionally not calling out high density dwellings? And I'm talking like high density, like multi-floor condo apartments.
I don't think that the fire department has the ability to service those right now.
Gotta be 2 stories, nothing over
Yeah.
2 stories.
We don't have a ladder truck.
Yeah, but if you look through the table, there's stuff on there that we don't have in Orinoco. We don't have a theater, we don't have a funeral home.
This was taken from the original chart that there was that we've had for years in Orinoco. Just so you know that, Marie.
So you're saying you want to add something that,
I'm just asking, is there a reason why we're not calling them out? I'm not saying they need to be added, I'm just trying to understand, because there's things in that table that we don't have in Orinoco.
Does
So
R2
this,
allow for higher than quads? If it doesn't, then
checking. Cause I mean, I can think
I
of,
think that, oh, sorry.
you could have higher density units in R2, you can have apartments, things like that. I mean, I've lived in 2-story apartment buildings. They're usually just short and wide, but that would be more considered the higher
Yeah,
density.
you just can't go 3 stories.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, everything, most of the houses are 2-story houses that there are, which we can service with fire.
So. a good
But it looks
question.
like your
Coming with
R2
a-
does not do higher than 3. You can do a single family, you can do a 2 family, which would be a duplex, or you could do a 3 family, so a triplex. Is listed as permitted, and then you don't have quad or anything higher than that anywhere in that R2
But
zone right
but
now.
we're looking at the stuff right now with Draken being quad.
Yeah,
You know,
It was a planned unit development.
Right.
Your current code.
right, and so we'd already approved that, which you could do through a variant.
Right. So
But they're
maybe,
not multi-floor though.
no,
So do we need to call that out when it's like a quad? So it's you know, side by side versus 3 floors?
You can't do 3 floors.
Going back to our consistency and just making it make sense, quad is listed in the definitions. It's one of the definitions in there,
I
so.
think it's listed in the shoreland,
So it,
which we didn't, the DNR.
so that should be added to your table.
something to the, what I was getting at, it should be in the table, if it's in the definitions or removed from the definitions.
That'd be added to the table. So we've got the shoreline one.
so from the fire
Yes,
department's,
good catch.
no, from the fire department's capabilities, yes, we don't have the ladder track, but you said they just don't have the ladders that can go to the 3rd floor now?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so,
And your R2 zone does limit your height, sorry to cut you off.
Yes.
I'm sorry,
Your R2 zone does limit your height to no taller than 2.5 stories or 30 feet.
30.
Yes.
And I
Which
think
I
our
presume
current-
it's concurrent with your
Yes.
Our
fire.
current is 35 feet,
Correct.
so why did it drop down to 30? Should we keep 35?
You could do.
It's a good note for when we get to that.
Good.
It's a good note for when we get to that.
That point is, so,
I have to agree with Ryland, let it stay where, what the current height already is.
So on that table, again, if we're gonna add quads, apartments are also listed in the definitions too. So again, if we're gonna be consistent of where they go, I think we need to put that on there too.
Yep. Yeah, I know we've hit the 2-hour mark.
let's carry on.
So I just want to make sure we get through this section and then we'll go from there. So is there anything else with this section with the permitted use?
The, on 151.041 uses, conditional uses of a, total combined, I'm sorry, under conditional uses C,
That's in R1. We're not into that section. That's in the R1
I'm
section.
sorry, I had it covered up.
So Maria, on the chart, you were talking something about adding something about high density.
Apartment.
Well, I just was asking, cause there's no apartment or like high density homes listed there. And I didn't know if we were intentionally not calling that out, but again, to Graham's point, quad is listed in the definition. Apartments are also listed in the definition, so we probably should go through the definition and make sure we have all of them aligned.
Yep. And we can get that added.
And the definition of apartment is 3 or more dwelling units grouped in one.
We already
So
have some of
A
those.
triplex is considered an apartment building. According to
And a
this
quad would be an
and
apartment
a
building.
quad would be an apartment building.
But neither of them are on that chart.
The 3-plex is under
You
R2.
lost me on quads being 3 levels or whatever you said.
No.
More than 3
More than
units.
3, you,
An apartment building is 3 or more consecutive units.
But an apartment also includes any buildings with 2 or more than 2 dwelling units.
so it's already in there, so you don't have to worry about it,
A lot of redundancy there.
yeah.
But that's just in the definition. So anyway, we'll take a look at those and add them accordingly. And make the adjustments there. Okay, so we've hit the 2-hour mark a little after. I'm fine with adjourning this for now and carrying into the next one. And going from there, we will start with R1 and R2 next week.
You know, how's yours too?
What?
Getting R2 in an hour.
No, that's why we're gonna go ahead and do that. So we will, next week, we'll do start with the R1 and R2. Any questions? Okay, and real quick, I just want to touch base. This was something that these 3 things that were also included, these are kind of checklist forms. that were created to help with council and also work for P and Z. At a glance, things, Evan helped kind of look over these as well to make sure they fit within. I think these will be great tools for council and P and Z, kind of help clean up some of the stuff we already have. But just as you're going through, we get these things, you can use this as, do they meet this, or is their application meeting this? Cause this is kind of the same stuff we use, right? In the office, but just so as you guys are in your meetings, be able to check off and go, okay, yep, this actually fits, or no, this one doesn't fit. And so it kind of gives you that benefit behind of, can it be approved or not approved? So,
Thank you.
all right, that's all I got.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marie and Paul, for joining us.
Yep, thank you guys.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night. Yep.
Bye-bye.
All right, thank you.